Good morning, class, and welcome again to our last module, Module 5, where we will be talking about life in late adulthood. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to state the changes which occur in memory and information processing as people age, summarize continuity theory as it relates to the aging process, show how cognitive changes in late adulthood can affect mental health, and evaluate and give solutions for the key social issues affecting older adults. And now that we are on the topic of late adulthood, this seems to be a topic that people either shy away from or they learn as much as possible in order to live longer. So, what do you think about aging? Is it something that you look forward to, or do you fear it? One thing is indeed certain, and that is that everyone at some point in time eventually dies or faces death. So, the first topic that we can come to is life expectancy, or as your text puts it, longevity. Now, life expectancy has increased over the years, and it is now roughly at 75 years for men and 80 years for women. And this rise is essentially due to the fact that more humans have better access to medical care and a higher quality of care as well. Other factors can also come into play, such as a person's diet and their exercise regime. And on the screen, we have a basic world map which shows the general life expectancy according to where you live. And if we examine this map, it is very interesting that if we look at Africa, in some areas of Africa, the life expectancy is under 45 years of age. And we can argue here as well that the poor access to medical care could be a contributing factor here. And we also have other regions such as Australia, and then we have also Canada, which have high life expectancies. Now, it doesn't mean that if you travel to Canada or you decide to relocate to one of these areas that you will automatically have a high life expectancy. It just means that the people in these areas, they probably go for their checkups often, and you have a high number of people who probably have a good lifestyle and good diet, and all these things contribute to longevity. Now, although there are differences in health among different elderly people, there are some fundamental changes which occur when we are speaking in a general sense about late adulthood. Thus, we first have the physical changes which take place. And the first section we will look at is the brain. As we learned before, when we spoke about changes in adulthood, the body has already begun to slowly decline. And this remains true in later adulthood and in the later years of life. And this even occurs at a faster rate. The brain continues to lose neurons every day, and the weight of the brain also decreases at this stage. Memory is also affected here, and Stuart Hamilton in 2012 speaks about some evidence which showed that we can see a decline in short-term memory. In the study, a person was asked to repeat numbers given in a backwards order. So for example, if the numbers were 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the person had to reply backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it was shown in this study that as people get older, they become significantly worse at this task. All of our senses, in addition, progressively decline at this age. Vision and hearing are two senses which are said to be the most affected in a general sense. But we also have a decline in taste, smell, and touch. What really happens is that blood flow to the eye decreases. And that is why, for example, you may realize that older people who drive do not like to drive at night. And this is because the transition has become more challenging for them. We see the common diseases associated with vision as well here. For example, we have glaucoma and cataracts. In terms of hearing, you also see a decline or a loss of hearing high frequency sounds as you get older. And that is why you would find it common for a number of elderly people that you may have to speak louder and you have to speak clearly in order for them to hear and to understand you. Cardiovascular, respiratory, and the immune system also declines at this stage. Now, as we get older, those in late adulthood become out of breath, as it were, versus someone who was younger than them. And thus, simple tasks may cause more exertion. Walking up the stairs, crossing the street, hurrying to catch the bus. In the heart, the walls thicken on the left side of the heart, and thus one is more at risk to have an irregular heartbeat or even a heart attack. As a matter of fact, the elderly are at risk for many types of ailments, such as, besides the others that we mentioned before, you can have stroke, cancer, dementia, Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's disease. And at this time, we will take a look at a brief description of one of these ailments, that is Parkinson's disease.
Is that persistent tremor just a normal sign of aging, or could it be something more serious? Could it be Parkinson's disease?
More than 1.5 million Americans suffer from the degenerative movement disorder known as Parkinson's disease. Although the disease is currently incurable, it is not fatal. Parkinson's primarily affects the elderly, with almost all diagnoses being made after the age of 60. In fact, just 15% of patients experience Parkinson's symptoms before age 50. Parkinson's disease is not new. In fact, it has been around for centuries. Symptoms of Parkinson's were first described in ancient Indian and Chinese texts, where the recommended treatment was a series of herbal preparations. The disease was formally recognized in 1817 when British physician James Parkinson published an essay cataloging the symptoms. He called the disease paralysis agitans, but fellow doctors soon coined the disease Parkinson's. Today, scientists understand that Parkinson's disease results in part from a shortage of the brain chemical dopamine. Dopamine stimulates receptors in the basal ganglia, a part of the brain that controls motor functions and emotions. Normal brain stimulation results in good nerve cell function and normal movements. In people with Parkinson's, however, 70% or more of these dopamine cells have died, reducing the amount of dopamine in the system. As a result, movement becomes very difficult. Classic Parkinson's symptoms include tremors, difficulty balancing, stiff limbs, and slower movements. Some patients experience decreased facial movement, including trouble blinking and swallowing. The cause of Parkinson's is unknown, although scientists do suspect that both genetics and exposure to environmental toxins may play a role. In rare cases, head trauma, stroke, or prescription antipsychotic medication may also contribute to the onset of symptoms. Although Parkinson's disease is progressive, people who have it can still lead fulfilling, productive lives. Just look at three-time world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali. Since his diagnosis in the mid-1980s, Ali has written a book, started a line of healthy snack food, and traveled the world for humanitarian aid projects. Actor Michael J. Fox hasn't let Parkinson's get in the way of his career either, starring in more than 20 feature films and television series since he began experiencing symptoms in the early 1990s. The actor is also an advocate for people with the disease and has created the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. Although the disease known as Parkinson's is not curable, there are a number of treatments that can help sufferers lead healthy lives. So please, talk to your doctor if you have concerns about Parkinson's.
Want to learn more? Check out other videos and sources on this site for more information.
Every 4 seconds, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. It's the most common cause of dementia, affecting over 40 million people worldwide. And yet, finding a cure is something that still eludes researchers today. Dr. Alois Alzheimer, a German psychiatrist, first described the symptoms in 1901, when he noticed that a particular hospital patient had some peculiar problems, including difficulty sleeping, disturbed memory, drastic mood changes, and increasing confusion. When the patient passed away, Alzheimer was able to do an autopsy and test his idea that perhaps her symptoms were caused by irregularities in the brain's structure. What he found beneath the microscope were visible differences in brain tissue in the form of misfolded proteins called plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. Those plaques and tangles work together to break down the brain's structure. Plaques arise when another protein in the fatty membranes surrounding nerve cells gets sliced up by a particular enzyme, resulting in beta-amyloid proteins, which are sticky and have a tendency to clump together. That clumping is what forms the things we know as plaques. These clumps block signaling and therefore communication between cells, and also seem to trigger immune reactions that cause the destruction of disabled nerve cells. In Alzheimer's disease, neurofibrillary tangles are built from a protein known as tau. The brain's nerve cells contain a network of tubes that act like a highway for food molecules, among other things. Usually, the tau protein ensures that these tubes are straight, allowing molecules to pass through freely. But in Alzheimer's disease, the protein collapses into twisted strands or tangles, making the tubes disintegrate, obstructing nutrients from reaching the nerve cell and leading to cell death. The destructive pairing of plaques and tangles starts in a region called the hippocampus, which is responsible for forming memories. That's why short-term memory loss is usually the first symptom of Alzheimer's. The proteins then progressively invade other parts of the brain, creating unique changes that signal various stages of the disease. At the front of the brain, the proteins destroy the ability to process logical thoughts. Next, they shift to the region that controls emotions, resulting in erratic mood changes. At the top of the brain, they cause paranoia and hallucinations. And once they reach the brain's rear, the plaques and tangles work together to erase the mind's deepest memories. Eventually, the control centers governing heart rate and breathing are overpowered as well, resulting in death. The immensely destructive nature of this disease has inspired many researchers to look for a cure, but currently, they're focused on slowing its progression. One temporary treatment helps reduce the breakdown of acetylcholine, an important chemical messenger in the brain, which is decreased in Alzheimer's patients due to the death of the nerve cells that make it. Another possible solution is a vaccine that trains the body's immune system to attack beta-amyloid plaques before they can form clumps. But we still need to find an actual cure. Alzheimer's disease was discovered more than a century ago, and yet still it is not well understood. Perhaps one day we'll grasp the exact mechanisms at work behind this threat, and a solution will be unearthed.
In the previous video, we also saw an explanation of what is Alzheimer's disease. And now we will continue our discourse to look at one theory of psychosocial aging, and that is continuity theory. And this is a theory by Ashley in 1989, who stated that individuals adjust to becoming elderly by completing and participating in the same kinds of things and activities that they did when they were younger in adulthood. Of course, there is a change to adapt to the new circumstances. For example, a retiree does not have a job any longer, but in the vein of continuous theory, they may still keep busy by finding other jobs in inverted commas to do. This even would be true in terms of personality and friendships, for example. And I have a good example of this, a personal example in action. I have a family friend who is a recently retired teacher. And while she was a teacher, she was very, very busy, always working. And now, even though she is retired, it is the same. If one didn't know her, you would really believe that she still has a job. She's always out of the house. She's never home. She's always taking care of her business, as she puts it. Plus, she volunteers regularly at a local center. Family relationships and friendships have become very important at this time, and the benefits of friendships at this stage are obvious. It is important for adults who are getting older and facing various challenges to have at least one friend that they can talk to and confide in. Indeed, this is also beneficial to combat against loneliness and depression as well. Family relationships also come into play here, as a lot of the time your parents took care of you, and now you in turn will take care of your parents as they age. And this is where the benefits are seen from reproduction in the early years. Grandparents in today's society also seem to take on new roles, as in some cases they become either the daycare for their grandchildren or they end up raising their own grandchildren, their children's child themselves. And this can be for a wide range of factors. For example, a parent may be on drugs or in jail or neglectful or in financial constraints, for example. And finally, there are also many social issues which come to the forefront when you are having a discussion on the elderly. And one important issue is that of housing. Many older adults wish to stay in the home that they have spent their entire adult life. And for those who do, they also want to live independently on their own. And if one is healthy and active, this usually does not pose a problem. But once physical and mental deficiencies appear, this becomes difficult. For some, they have the option of having adjustments done to their home, as well as having an on-call nurse who gives daily assistance for a few hours every day. But however, other options may arise, and some other options could be elderly parents may move in with their children to live. They may have to move into a residential community who caters specifically to the elderly, or they may be placed in a nursing home if they are extremely challenged. And the nursing home provides the 24-hour care, daily care. The issues which may arise from any of these situations are grave. Now, you may have the situation of abuse or maltreatment of the elderly, and this is because elderly individuals are at the stage of their life where they may be perceived as weaker, or so they may be at the risk, or they may have a risk of being taken advantage of. And examples of maltreatment can be found in your textbook on page 571 and 572. And I'll read some of these examples for you. You have physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, financial or material exploitation, especially if a person receives a check every month in pension. The money may be taken from them and individual might spend this money. You can have abandonment, you can have neglect and self-neglect. And all of these are issues which affect the elderly. I must state here before we close that if you see any issue or problem with any elderly adult being abused, it is really your responsibility to report this abuse, because a lot of times the perpetrators may be individuals who are close to those who are elderly, and they don't have the voice to speak for themselves. So that is just a side note on that topic. Now we've come to the end of another lecture, and I hope you have also enjoyed it, where we learned about dealing with late adulthood. Now, feel free again to ask me any questions or queries that you may have, and continue to have a blessed day.